So why the four pillars? The four pillars of health are, firstly, nutrition, number one, movement, number two, rest and repair, number three, and then number four is mindset. Now, there's many different ways we can sum up the story of health or the picture of health and what it is to live with good human health. The reason why the four pillars have been something that I've based the philosophy of my business on and I live my life by is partly two things. I mean, there's definitely a personal part of this for me, and it's due to my own journey through illness and injury and coming out the other side. But before I get into that, if we actually look at these four pillars, Hippocrates was actually one of the first physicians that's been well documented, that has a lot of that is put out a lot of writing that we can access today. And Hippocrates listed three areas that were crucial for human health. And when he saw a patient, he would look at what they ate, he would look at how they sleep, and he would look at how happy their lives are. So these three areas. What's interesting is he didn't look at exercise and the level of exercise that the patient did. But there's a key difference to when Hippocrates was around and what life is like now. Nowadays, we can actually go a full day, we can go a full week, we can go a full year and not really do much movement at all. I mean, I know during lockdown in Melbourne at the moment of people that are walking less than 500 steps a day. They're barely moving their body. And even outside of the context of the pandemic, it's really common, depending on your job, to have very little movement in your life. So this fourth pillar is very much relevant to the modern world that we live in. So it's not the concept of if we add in the movement one in modern times, but those three pillars of nutrition, rest and repair, and mindset, or happiness, as Hippocrates put it, is definitely not a new concept. As I said, there's a personal part of this for me as well. Before I founded Rossfit and got into becoming a health and performance coach, I was a soldier in the Australian Army. And as a soldier for almost a decade, I got to experience, and very much my life was all about doing everything I could to optimize my physical performance. Mental performance probably wasn't as high up on the list. It was definitely there, but I didn't have much knowledge around that at the time. But physical performance was huge, obviously, as a soldier. Nevertheless, I still sustained a pretty serious back injury and a number of health concerns from several deployments overseas. I was in Kenya working in Kenya when my back injury sort of peaked, and I had to come back to Australia, and I explored a number of different options. In fact, I saw over a dozen different practitioners to try and overcome my back injury. As I said, I had other health concerns, mainly sort of gut health related, that I couldn't put my finger on either, and I'd been exploring that for years. I was lost. I mean, I couldn't sit down for any extensive period of time. I definitely couldn't exercise. So for someone who exercise was my life, it pretty much sucked. So I was listening to a podcast. It was a health podcast by a guy named Sean Croxton. He had the Underground Wellness podcast. It's not around anymore, but it was a really amazing podcast about a decade ago. And I remember listening to a podcast where he interviewed a guy by the name of Paul Chek, this Canadian American. And the podcast was set up as a Q&A. So Paul was the guest on the podcast, but Sean Croxton was actually just getting people to ring in and ask Paul questions. And I didn't know anything about Paul Chek. I'm like, well, who is this guy to have the knowledge to be able to answer all of these complex questions that were being thrown at him? And it was fascinating. I was fascinated by how he responded. Paul would ask such interesting questions. He seemed to take a really wide scope when he was investigating this person's issues and then providing some advice. And, it wasn't, it didn't make me completely convinced that this man was, his approach was the way forward, but it was so different to everything that I'd experienced in the journey I'd already started on in trying to get better, that I was definitely intrigued. So I tracked down the most experienced Czech practitioner in Australia, who at the time was a guy by the name of Donald Carr. He was based in Sydney. So I contacted Donald, and over a series of conversations with Donald, decided that I would work with him. And he would help me not only with my back injury, but also with the health concerns that I was having. So I flew up to Sydney several times over the course of a 6-month period. Not once did Donald do any manual therapy on me. He didn't treat me in that respect. He coached me. He gave me the tools that I needed in order to help myself. What I learned over those 6 months was huge. Now, this was all specific to me. I wasn't learning how to help others at this stage. I was a certified personal trainer by then, but I definitely wasn't. I wasn't looking at helping others with these skills. It was just trying to overcome these serious injuries I had. And I was blown away by, one, the link between my gut health and my back injury, but two, the link between my mindset, how much time I put into rest and repair, things like meditation and qigong, ice baths, cold showers. All of these different things were being thrown at me, but I was starting to see the connection with how they actually related to my specific injury, but also where I wanted to go in terms of my goal of being fully fit and capable again. In 6 months, I was mostly better. In about 12 months, I was back to doing all of the sports that I love. So nowadays, I still practice martial arts. I climb mountains, I rock climb, compete in obstacle course races, and do everything else in between. So I have no limitations. Now, I don't know of anyone that's had a herniated disc in their lower back that has not had surgery that has been able to get back to that level through traditional means. So that was huge. I've then gone on and studied through the Czech Institute, Paul Czech's institute that he founded in California, and through a number of different osteopaths and other practitioners over the years. And my business, Rossfit, that is very much founded on the philosophy of owning the 4 pillars, or as Paul Czech puts it, the 4 doctors. And having a really good understanding of those 4 doctors and being able to draw on them to support you in your endeavors in life, in your pursuit for great health, or for whatever else is important to you and your purpose and your mission in your life. When we look at the four pillars, as I said, nutrition, rest and repair, movement, mindset. When we work with our clients, we actually put a focus on the first 3. And the reason is, and I always like to explain this before I go into the 4 pillars, because that's what I'm going to move into next, and actually start talking about some, what I would consider to be the low-hanging fruit in each of these 4 pillars. But what I want to talk about first is, and I think that this is really specific to now, to the world that we're living in at the moment, a world with a lot of, you could argue, a fair bit of turmoil, a fair bit of uncertainty, and a lot of change that we're all having forced on us. And what we're seeing is that mental health issues and mental health concerns are even more a forefront than they were in our minds and in our lives than they were 6 months ago. And in the context of the 4 pillars and what I'm going to talk about, mental health is something that is, it's such a, it can be complex to look at. Okay, how do I improve my outlook? I was asked a question yesterday on a podcast about how I stay so positive, and I said my response to that was, well, I definitely don't it's not just as simple as saying, oh, I'm going to wake up this morning and I'm going to say that I'm positive. Imagine if I had a patient or a client that came to me and said, Ross, how do I be more positive? I've got all these negative thoughts going around in my mind, and I have poor willpower, bad motivation, and I just don't have, I'm getting depressed. So if my response was, you just need to turn that around. You just need to be a little bit more, be a bit more positive. Just see the bright side of life. Probably that person will walk out the door. Now, obviously, there's a whole field of psychology and counselling where we can explore things like previous traumas and maybe some programming or things that have gone on in that person's life that can be cleared to allow a better outlook in the present moment and an outlook towards the future. But in terms of things that we can act on immediately, it's very hard to just change our mindset. But if we look at the other pillars, they're a little bit more tangible in that you can all go away today and go to your farmer's market or your local market and purchase lots of healthy, fresh, organic vegetables, and you can start putting more vegetables in your diet. That's something you can actually do. It doesn't require being a completely new person. It might require sort of making a list and having some intentions and actually, making that as a task and doing it. But it's definitely going to be easier than just changing your mindset completely. Also with the movement, you may, if I said to you, I want you to go out and make sure you walk at least 5 kilometers today. It can be broken up over a course of the day, but I want you to walk 5 kilometers or do some form of exercise. Most people will be able to do that, no matter how negative they might be suffering in their mindset, that they'll be able to achieve that. And then the last one, rest. It's not that, I mean, we all sleep. So definitely some of us, or a lot of us do suffer from sleeping issues, be it that we don't get enough sleep or that we have insomnia or we wake up during the night. But there are changes you can make. You can take magnesium. You can do 5 minutes of deep breathing before you go to bed, and you can really make some quite tangible ways of improving that. The mindset stuff, as I said, is a little bit more challenging. But what's amazing about if we do put a focus on those first 3 pillars is that does definitely, and I've seen it in myself and I've seen it in countless clients over the years, and there's research backing this up, that has a positive impact on our mental health. That is a known now. It's not a woo-woo alternative health theory. This is known that if we consume a diet that's low or void of refined sugars, we eat a diet that's abundant in vegetables and fresh foods, it's going to give us a better hormonal balance in our body that's going to allow our mental state to be a bit more balanced. If we get more sleep, I mean, I hope all of you tuning in right now have experienced yourself that if you have a few days or a week of consistently good sleep, that life just feels better. Your outlook is better. You are able to manage dramas or issues in your life a lot easier. What is considered a drama becomes not so much of a drama now. It's something that you can manage. And all of that is just because you've had enough rest. And movement. I mean, who has not experienced that release of endorphins, that mental clarity and calmness that you get after doing exercise? And it doesn't have to be an intense workout. It can just be going for a nice gentle walk in a park or on the beach. That can be enough to get that amazing mental health benefit from it. So it's huge. It's huge to really put a focus on these 4 pillars and figuring out where are the areas you've got to work on the most. So from today, when I go into the 2 takeaways from each pillar, you might find that, so that's 8 in total, you might find that 3 or 4 of those you're on point with already. That's awesome. Give that a tick. Make sure you keep maintaining it. But then you might find another 3 or 4 that you haven't mastered, that are something you could improve in. That's what I want you to write down today. That's what I want you to start implementing as a habit. Because the beauty with positive habits is they promote positive habits. They promote motivation. They promote a greater desire and passion for achieving the goals that you've got in your life. Or even in some situations where people are so low in vitality and energy and abundance that they can't even consider the concept of setting goals and having a purpose, because I've seen that countless times over. If we work on the building up these building blocks, they're putting enough vitality into their body through the nourishing food and hydration that they're getting, through getting enough rest and movement, they're actually able to start adding so many more layers to their life. And that's really why, hand on heart, I can say that when we put attention in these areas, it leads to a happier life. What's the key to happiness? The key to happiness is being as vital as you possibly can, being in a position where you can then actually say that you're making the most of your time on this planet. It's hard to say you're making the most of the time, this time on the planet, if you're sick half the time, if you're low in energy half the time, if you're feeling lethargic and you're running from one sugar high to the next. Pretty hard to say you're happy all the time when that's the world you're living in. So let's dig into the first one, being nutrition. Nutrition's always the first one, because if we've got low vitality and we start inputting the right foods into our diet, that can raise our vitality enough that we can then start making better choices in the other three doctors. So, I mean, nutrition, right? I mean, this is a huge topic. This is something that if you Google the best diet for humans, you will not get a simple answer. You will get everything from a carnivorous diet to a vegan diet to everything in between, to eating keto, to eating high carb, low fat, and everything else in between. So what I don't intend to today is to go too deep into the nitty-gritty of all of that. That's a separate conversation that requires a lot more time. What I want to give you in terms of nutrition are really the two biggest things. No matter what your diet is, no matter what your philosophy is, no matter if you currently eat vegan or if you eat, or if you've got an omnivore diet. The first one is 9V, 9 cups of vegetables a day. Now, some of you who are on this webinar who have worked with myself or Ruby in the past, or Adam, you will have heard of this. The concept of 9 cups of vegetables a day came from a doctor named Terry Walls, an American doctor, who cured herself. Well, I don't want to say cure, actually, who reversed her multiple sclerosis symptoms. So she had stage 2, secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, and was effectively able to reverse her symptoms through functional nutrition and functional medicine, has then gone on to support other patients in achieving the same thing. And through her study of functional medicine and functional nutrition, she developed the concept of 9 cups of vegetables a day. Now, that sounds like a lot. So when I say a cup, I'm talking a standard measuring cup. Now, that's broken into 3 areas or 3 categories of vegetables. The first category is leafy greens. Leafy greens being everything from lettuce, kale, spinach to like fresh herbs, silver beet, things like that. So when I say 3 cups of that, I'm talking 3 tightly packed cups. So sort of scramming in as much leafy greens as you can into those 3 cups. When that would be emptied out onto a dinner plate, that would overflow a large dinner plate. So I'm talking a good amount of greens, not a little token side salad to your dinner. The second category is colourful vegetables, so rich colourful vegetables, and she actually includes fruits into this category, the colourful vegetables and fruits, but only fruits that have colour all the way through. So an orange would be included in that, a kiwi fruit would be included, but a banana and an apple would not be included, for example. And a lot of stone fruits would not be included unless it's, say, like a blood plum where it's just red all the way through. And the reason why she specifies that is about antioxidant content in the fruit. And for vegetables, something similar. So a potato would not count into this category, as wouldn't a parsnip. But we're talking pumpkin, broccoli, zucchini, cucumber, all of those sorts of things. And then the last category being sulfur-rich vegetables. So most people don't know what that category is. It's actually broken into 3 areas, which is your onion family, your cabbage family, and your mushroom family. And that includes things as well like garlic and ginger, and you can Google sulfur-rich vegetables and you'll get a good list. In fact, you can Google the Terry Walls 9V and you'll get a breakdown of all of them. So that's an easy resource you can find yourself. So why, out of everything I could be talking about nutrition, have I said the first thing is 9 cups of vegetables a day? Firstly, it's because what I see and what is that this is the area that most people are deficient in. Maybe not 9 cups of vegetables, but an abundance in vegetables at all is something that most people's diet is deficient in. Even vegans, even people that that have cut out a number of categories of food, still it's very common that they're deficient in this area. We've all heard the saying, "You are what you eat." And I mean, I would have heard that as a teenager. I'm sure my parents would have told me that. I definitely didn't connect to that as a teenager. I didn't connect with that as a 20-year-old. I really didn't connect to that probably until the last 5 or 6 years. And it's because we get that when we put food into our body, that we get stuff from that food and we eliminate a percentage of that as well. We get that at a level. But I don't believe we get the concept that every cell in our body has actually come from food. Every cell in our body, the cell membrane, the wall of the cell, the atoms that make up the cell have come from the food we eat. Every 7 years, we are a completely different person. Not one cell in our body is the same 7 years from what it is now. That's the reality. So if we're eating food that is poorly produced, if we're eating food that is highly refined, if we're eating food that's not bioavailable, as in the nutrient content we can't actually access, then we're producing, I'm just going to shut my door, sorry. Getting noises coming from outside. But we're producing our own cells with poor building blocks. If we have an abundance of vegetables making up our diet, what that does automatically is it starts to reduce the stuff that we don't want to be having too much of. The stuff like low nutrient density, high caloric density foods. And they're everywhere. I'm talking breads, pastas, other processed grains, flours. I'm not saying we have to cut these out of our diet completely, but what I am saying is that if we can reduce these significantly and replace them with an abundance of vegetables, the proof is in the pudding. You will see the difference. You will see the difference in how much energy you've got. You'll see the difference in how well you sleep. You'll see the difference in your clarity of thought, your ability to remember things. And this last bit you won't see straight away, but trust me, you'll see this in how well you age. You'll see this in 20, 30 years' time. So 9 cups of vegetables. It's as simple and as complex as that. It does mean that breakfast, ideally, is not something that's void of vegetables. And the reality is, it is the case like that for most people. For most people, what is breakfast? Breakfast is either a coffee and a bagel as you're walking to work or sort of at your local cafe. It's cereal with milk on it. It's toast with jam on it. All of these things are void of significant amount of nutrients, but they're very high in processed carbohydrates. And what that does, processed carbohydrates, without going too deep into that rabbit hole, is it causes a shitstorm in your bloodstream, and that shitstorm being sugar, being glucose. So you may have heard of the term GI index or blood glucose index. The GI of a food, the higher the GI, basically means the quicker it causes a spike in your blood sugar levels. And processed grains, sugars, things like that. And it might even be this beautiful, fantastic organic bread that you've bought from your local bakery that is sugar-free. That will still be very high GI. That will still have an effect to your blood sugar. And what that effectively is, that's a hormonal, a chemical stress happening on your body when your blood sugar levels go up, because then your body needs to use energy and nutrients to produce insulin to release into the blood to try and quickly lower those cortisol, blood glucose levels. Now that's taking away nutrients and energy to use to develop hormones that are our rest and repair hormones, that are our growth hormones, that is what we need to stay vital now and into the future. So imagine if we're eating foods, sugar and breads and pastas and wraps and all these things multiple times a day, we're taking away vitality that could be being used for our current rest and repair and our growth, the growth of our body, our body's ability to fight cancer, to fight diseases, to fight viruses. Instead, we're putting that vitality into just managing the crap that we're putting into our body. When you put it that way, hopefully that starts to make you realize that the little treat that you have after every meal, or the donut that you decide that you can have once a day because that's balance, when you start to really look at what that means, it puts it in a different light, doesn't it? The second point under nutrition is actually hydration. That comes under, we put that under the same category. And the reason why I put hydration as the second takeaway, the low-hanging fruit under this, for this pillar, is once again that most people don't drink enough water. A common complaint I get from people when I tell them to drink more water or suggest they drink more water is that they say, oh, now I'm going to the toilet all the time and I wake up during the night and I'm like continually going to the loo. What I say in return is give it a shot for a little bit longer. Let's give it a month of consistently drinking enough water. And then the second thing I say is make sure the water you're drinking is good quality and it actually contains minerals, what we call total dissolved solids, the TDS reading of water. Now, if you're drinking tap water and you live in Melbourne and many other municipalities is the same, it's very low in mineral content. And what that means is as you drink all of this extra H2O, you're not getting in all of the extra electrolytes, all of those trace minerals that your body needs to actually maintain a good balance of sort of these electrical current stimulating minerals and H2O. And we're effectively drowning ourselves if we just drink heaps of water without that mineral content, which is no wonder why your body's quickly trying to eliminate it. So you go to the loo all the time. Now, I drink 2 to 3 liters of water a day. I make sure I don't drink a lot right before bed, but I never wake up during the night to go to the loo unless I've done something wrong, unless I've sort of drunk, a liter of water before I go to bed or something like that. Outside of that, if we're drinking water throughout the day, and then we ideally stop water consumption before dinner and we don't sort of start again until the next morning, and we make sure the water we have is mineral rich. Then you will find that after a good consistent month of drinking enough water, you won't be needing to pee all the time. But the benefit you're going to get is you're going to be sleeping better, you're going to be resting better, you're going to feel like you have more energy just from something as simple as drinking enough water. It's huge. How do you get enough minerals in your water? If you're drinking tap water at the moment, the quickest thing you can do that you can start right away is adding a pinch of Himalayan rock salt or sea salt to your water, to every glass of water you drink. If you're having a bottle of water, I carry around a 1 litre bottle of water. I put, a good percentage of a teaspoon, or more like sort of like an 1/8 to a 1/4 of a teaspoon will go in my bottle every morning. If you want to add a layer to that, filter your water. The beauty of that is that's going to take a lot of the chemicals and heavy metals out of the water that we ideally don't want for fantastic hydration. So we would filter it, and then we would still remineralize it with 2 of those salt options that I mentioned. So moving on, as I said, if you've got questions around those things, you can throw them in the chat or just take a note, and we'll hopefully have time to come back to it at the end. But we've covered off on really what I would consider to be the two low-hanging fruit under nutrition. If you're not doing those two well, don't worry about the fancy supplements or the protein powders, the this, the that, the other. Get those two things right first, then we can start adding layers to it and getting a lot more complex if we want to really optimize. So the next one I want to talk about is rest repair or rest recovery. The first one, and it's got to be an obvious one, doesn't it? Sleep. I think it's an obvious one. Why do we sleep? We sleep so that we develop energy and cultivate energy so that we can actually live during the day. Now, we sleep so that our brain can detoxify effectively and go and run a number of processes that allow us to convert short-term memory to long-term memory, to process information. I don't know how many of you this has happened to, that after a great night's sleep, you wake up and that problem that you had the day before is now no longer a problem because you've figured out what you needed to do. Your brain actually processes a lot of information while we're sleeping. But our brain takes at least 7 hours to do that. And what most neurologists now say is that we need at least 8 hours sleep a night. Some people as much as 9 hours. Now, if you look at how much sleep humans got on average in 1900, it was 9 hours a night. The average sleep that a human gets nowadays is 6 hours and 45 minutes. So we've cut over 2 hours per day off our body's ability, our brain's ability to rest and repair. And as I said earlier, when I was talking about mental health, sleep is one of the biggest things and one of the easiest things that people can do to improve their mental state. Now, if you're struggling with sleep, there can be a myriad of different things that can cause that. It can be diet and hydration related. If you're eating a lot of sugar during the day, and particularly breakfast, and dinner. But if breakfast is something that causes a spike in your blood sugar levels, what is often seen is a correlating spike in your blood sugar levels during the night while you're sleeping. Typically around, I think, early morning, like just after midnight. So what we do throughout the day is going to impact our ability to sleep well at night. Anything that causes a raise in blood sugar levels during our sleep is effectively a stress response on the body, and that can be enough to knock us out of a deep sleep or even wake us up, which is one reason why alcohol consumed in the evening is a really bad move if you want to sleep well, because what that does is that causes instability in our blood sugar levels. Even if it's a low carb or low sugar option, like if it's straight vodka or something, vodka with water, you're still going to get that same response, and it's from the alcohol itself. So sleep, getting at least 8 hours a night, and ideally from the hours of 10 p.m. onwards. So that's not getting to bed at midnight and waking up at 8. What's really interesting, it's called circadian rhythm, and the link between the body's own internal clocks and that of the earth, or where we are on the planet. That's why shift workers, even if they get their 8 hours, often have sleep deprivation related health issues come up. So sleeping from around the 10-hour clock to around the 6 or 7 o'clock is the ideal. The second point that I want to mention with rest and recovery is a really, I think, one that is often not really spoken about. It's balance. It's balance between potential building and performance doing. Or if we take a more sort of Eastern way of talking about balance, it's yin and yang. It's the two sides of the coin. Now, I don't know about you, but I love living life in performance. I love doing. I love training hard. I like testing my brain. I like performing, like being in the real world. The thing is, we can't do that all the time. Even after a good 8-9 hours sleep, we can't be going throughout the entire day. I could do that in my early 20s, but that's something that catches up on you. One of the keys to really having fantastic energy and vitality going forward is being able to find your balance of yin and yang, your balance of potential building. That can be everything from going for a slow walk on the beach. It can be chilling out, reading a novel or something like that. It could be playing with your kids. It's something that is not in any way going to spark a cortisol rise or a stress response in your body, versus performance, training, working hard, achieving, things that are championed in the Western world. But then resting is often not. Potential building is often actually frowned upon as you're wasting time, you're not being productive or efficient. But it's that yin time, it's that potential building time that allows us to be at our peak when we do want to perform. I like the analogy of revving the engine. How much are you revving your engine throughout the day? Ideally, you want to be revving it just enough for the task you're doing. And then when you really need to perform, you've got the ability to put the foot down. But you haven't been putting the foot down the whole morning, so that when you get to that important meeting, 11 o'clock, you're already burnt out and you can't put your foot down any further, and you feel lethargic and you're forgetting things. And I mean, who hasn't experienced that? I know I have. Definitely have, through the process of learning of that balance of yin and yang. So they're the 2 points under rest. It's sleep and it's finding that balance in our life. The next one is movement. Once again, just like the topic of nutrition, we could talk all day about exercise, about, should we be doing cardio versus strength training? Should I be doing HIIT workouts or going for a long 10K run? Is being a marathon runner good for us or not? This isn't a conversation about that. This is a conversation about what is the 2 easiest things that you can implement, the 2 most important things that you can implement from a movement perspective that's going to help you right now, and it's going to help you going forward. So that when you get to your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you're still able to move your body and function well. The first one, take your joints through their full range every day. And what I mean by that is not a walk. As much as walking is great, and you'll see from my next point, walking is something I recommend, but you're not taking joints through their full range. I tell this to my parents a lot. I say, well, you go for your walk every day, that's great, but that's not the whole picture. If you want to be able to flex your hips, bring your knee up towards your trunk, you need to practice that movement. What's one way of practicing that movement? It's called a squat or a lunge. We need to make sure that our shoulders get their full range and that we have a little bit of tone through the muscles that support that. Well, that's a push-up, and that's a row, either like with a band or a kettlebell or a weight, or pulling yourself up onto a bar. So doing exercises and movements, and this can come under the category of strength training or resistance training, or it could just be a mobility routine that you do in the morning that takes your joints through the full range. Yoga, in many ways, ticks the box on this, but in some ways doesn't completely, because it doesn't actually build resistance through all of those ranges. That's why I'm a believer in not just following one movement philosophy, but rather taking on different ones in order to support movement and the body's physical being in its entirety. The second point, so the first point, take your joints through their full range every single day. So that means a rest day means you just do a mobility routine. It doesn't have to be something hardcore. It could be a yoga class, something like that. The second point under movement is movement, regular movement. It doesn't have to be high intensity. It doesn't even have to be medium intensity, but movement. There's systems in the body called biological oscillators. The heart's one of them. The stomach is one of them. The brain is one of them. And these biological oscillators work when they're working in harmony, they allow synchronicity between the hormones and the various systems of the body. Movement, believe it or not, is actually one way the body actually achieves harmony through the various systems of our body. And movement can be a walk. It can be a jog for someone that's fairly fit, and a jog is considered to be not something too intense. But it's a lot of it. It's not just your 30-minute hardcore workout first thing in the morning and then you're sedentary for the rest of the day. I'm talking something that's actually got to occur for at least an hour a day. Which is why, you know, we're running, Rossfit's running a lockdown fitness and wellbeing challenge at the moment. And one of the ways that people can score points in this challenge is by doing at least an hour of exercise every single day. And that's there for a reason. It's because that is such a crucial part to our health now and our longevity moving forward, is moving a lot. So that could be broken up in many different ways throughout the day, and I encourage that. I think that's a really great way of doing it. It might be that you attend a group fitness class in the morning. It might be you then go for a walk at lunchtime. It might be that you set a timer on your phone that every hour while you're at your desk working, you have a timer that goes off and you get up and you do 20 squats and walk around the block or walk up and down the flight of stairs or something. Things like this to keep us keep our bodies moving, to keep things working in balance in the body. The other benefit is it increases our basal metabolic rate. So how much our body burns, how many calories our body burns just throughout a normal day, even before we add in intense exercise. Now that's important for a lot of different things, but including in healthy weight management. The last one, I've left it to last, as you all know now, mindset being probably the most important, but also sometimes the hardest one to actually make quite tangible, quick changes to. That's why we put effort into the others, so that we then have greater capacity to then think and function and be that positive person that always sees the glass half full. The two takeaways I want to give you though for mindset, and very important for Melburnians right now in lockdown, but to be honest, outside of lockdown, outside of living in Melbourne, this is always something so important. And that's exposing yourself to the sun every day. And ideally, the morning sun before midday. And this is for so many different reasons. What's amazing now is that some very progressive integrative medical doctors prescribe sun exposure as part of a treatment plan for people with mental health and other energy production illnesses or symptoms. It obviously exposes to vitamin D, it allows our body to synthesize vitamin D from sun exposure. So that is the best way that our body can produce and absorb vitamin D, is through sun exposure, sun hitting our skin, ideally without layers of products of moisturizers of skin guard stuff on. It's just hitting our skin. The eyes being the most potent part of the body that absorbs the most vitamin D. So ideally when you're out and you're exposing yourself to the sun, I copy something that I listened to, heard a doctor say years ago. He said that he tells his clients or his patients to go and stand out in the sun for at least 15 minutes in the morning, exposing as much of your body to the sun without offending your neighbors. So if you've got a backyard where you can stand naked in the sun and your neighbors don't see you, then do that. Otherwise, moderate it as required. The other thing that it does that's really fascinating, this is a more recent discovery, is that sun exposure in the morning, it actually causes a spike in our cortisol. It gives us energy. It gives us that healthy stress that allows us to tackle the day. But it also improves the body's ability to process melatonin in the evening and improve our body's ability to rest, get into that calm state, and then sleep. So if you're having sleep issues, one of the things that you should be doing is looking at making sure you're exposing yourself to the sun in the morning. Number 2 for mindset is breathing, our breath. The amazing thing about our breath is that it's something that happens automatically, but it's also something we can control. And our breath can have such a huge impact over pretty much every system of our body. And the reason why I say that is because research shows if you take a deep, slow breath through your nose, and you do that repeatedly for a few breaths, it will start to lower your cortisol levels and put your body or your nervous system into a parasympathetic state. So that is your breath actually changing the chemistry of your body. in that moment. And we all, everyone on this call right now, we all have the ability to implement a breathing practice right now. You can all be breathing deeper right this minute, and there'll be a chemical change in your body that can help you manage a stressful activity going on in front of you right now. It might actually be able to calm you so that you can think more clearly and be more creative as you're about to go into an important meeting or give an important presentation. It might allow you to calm down so that you can have a more effective sleep, or calm down so that when you sit down and eat your meal, you're actually able to effectively digest and absorb the nutrients in the amazing food that you've chosen to eat. So how do we have effective breathing? So the first one that we always teach our clients is just a deep diaphragmatic breath, where you breathe in, and the first thing that happens when you start to breathe in is your stomach expands. It pushes outwards, which allows your diaphragm to lower and for there to be more space in your lungs to actually fill all the way down to the bottom of the lungs. So a breath in through the nose as your stomach expands so your lungs can fully fill up with air. Another great technique is called box breathing or square breath, square breathing. You can Google that. You can Google or find some apps. There's a great mobile app called Box Breathing that you can download for free that allows you to set the standard timer for box breathing is 4 squares. So 4 seconds to breathe in, 4-second hold, 4 seconds to breathe out, and a 4-second pause. But you can change it if you want. I do a 5-5-5-5, and I find that works really well for me. And there's other techniques, pranayama breathing techniques that some yogi practitioners may be familiar with. Box breathing being one of them. 4-7-8 breath is another one. 5 minutes of that in the morning, up to 20. But then the ability to, so the beauty of doing that, say first thing in the morning, is it starts to ingrain that as something that your body just goes to do. So it's over time got to improve how deep your breath is. But then also, this is an important point, when you get into that fight-flight state, it's not an appropriate state to be in, as in you're getting flustered because there's too much going on and you actually lose concentration. You automatically go, oh, okay, I know what to do. I'm going to do a few rounds of box breathing, or I'm just going to do a few diaphragmatic breaths with my eyes closed. But if you've never done it before, and I tell you about it today, and then you go away and you never do it, and then something stresses you out, chances are you won't remember. But if you've implemented it as a daily practice, when you are in that calmer state, this then starts becoming just part of your DNA, just something that's part of your vocabulary and your toolbox that you can draw on. Diet being 9 cups of vegetables a day and drinking sufficient amount of water. One thing actually I didn't touch on with sufficient amount of water is around 1.8 to 3 litres, depending on your body weight. We can maybe go into that in more detail in the Q&A if people want to. The rest recovery being 8 hours of sleep a night, up to 9, and balancing yin and yang, potential versus performance. Movement, taking your joints through their full range every day, and at least an hour of some form of exercise, be it walking, jogging, running. It might be a circuit workout or whatever it is. And then mindset, exposing yourself to the sun every morning. Actually, one thing I didn't touch on with that is that is why it's under mindset, is because that has such a close correlation with what our perspective is like. Do we see as the situation as glass half full or glass half empty? If we've exposed ourselves to sun, and we've probably all experienced this when we've had a few sort of rainy, sort of cold days in winter, and we haven't been able to expose ourselves to the sun. And then the last one is breathing practice. Yeah, okay, so there's a question about how do you get magnesium and vitamin D up? Yeah, and the thing with vitamin D, low vitamin D, is correlated with low energy and depression. One reason why sun exposure is so important for your mental state. So to answer that question about how do you get your vitamin D up, it's always preferred that it comes from exposure to the sun, so absorption through the skin, versus your diet. You'll absorb a lot less vitamin D through your diet than you will from sun exposure. So sun exposure is number one. And it's yes, it's always harder to achieve in winter, but that's the reality. Number two, and then diet and supplementation is a legitimate second option with vitamin D, but it's definitely never going to be as great. With magnesium, there's definitely a lot of magnesium that can be found in dark leafy green vegetables, in nuts and seeds, in some animal products. On top of that, if you're living a stressful life, if you're training a lot, vitamin Z supplementation is definitely something that we do recommend quite a bit. Taking magnesium a couple of hours before sleep can be quite helpful. Yeah, so to get access to the morning sun in a Melbourne winter, how do you do that? Someone asked. So having a cold shower in the morning, what that will do, will improve your body's resilience to the cold over time. So then the idea of going out and standing outside on a fresh morning in the winter in Melbourne with a singlet on or your shirt off or something doesn't seem too crazy. And you do still get sun, or you get some of the benefits from the sun even when there's clouds. So if the sun is out and there isn't a big tree blocking it or something, then you'll get some benefits. Sun lamps, someone said, as an alternative. Yeah, there are. Look, I don't think anything beats the sun. There's a concept, or there's a technology called photobiomodulation that offers a number of benefits. But once again, I'd say that's a distant second to being exposed to the real sun. Really hope you got at least a couple of takeaways that you feel could benefit you in your life now and sort of your purpose going forward, because that was ultimately the intention of the webinar. So yeah, much appreciate you giving me all your time this morning, and have a fantastic weekend.